First edition of the trail map.
Well, but I think we told him that we were going to put it out there, so.
Because it was one we worked on for a while.
How far do you want to go? The fighting in Turchin's rear, really in the rear of Palmer's division, of which Turchin is because of due to his replacement of Hazen, effectively he's part of now, or at least integrated into Palmer's line. The fighting hasn't abated back there. This is about the time that William Bate makes his breakthrough, and his brigade attacks on that diagonal. Those of you who've been with us on previous walks, we've talked about some of that. And Bates' brigade goes all the way into Poe Field, or at least part of it goes into Poe Field. That's the famous gun line. Ambrose Bierce witnesses that ring of Union artillery that crushes Bates' attack. Well, Turchin and Cruft can hear all that, but they can't see it, obviously. What they see instead are elements of Gross's men retreating in our direction, coming through the woods here, and especially moving essentially westward along the corridor of the Brotherton Road. One of Gross's regiments is disrupted so badly it goes all the way, the 23rd Kentucky goes all the way into the north end of Poe Field. Gross has been outflanked, and his line has been rolled up in part by Bates people, and so his formation is lost, and now Palmer is trying to build a new line that will deal with this threat. When we talked about Palmer a couple years ago, I said, these troops basically went into action heading east, expecting to fight in that direction. They ended up spending most of their afternoon fighting facing south, and at the end of the day, they're dealing with a threat coming from the west at them. So they've worked their way around three sides of a box, and you can imagine how badly disrupted some of these regiments are, and how alarming this is, especially to Palmer, who's worried about being outflanked. Well, you've got Turchin, whose fallback position is always the charge. Do you want to take some here, or do you? Okay.
Finish them up.
Turchin reorients three of his regiments. The 18th Kentucky, which didn't go down there into the woods, which stayed out here to sort of anchor Turchin's original position, is going to remain in position here again. And the other three regiments are going to form a line, two up, one back, and the maps will show you that. And Turchin's going to counterattack. He's going to move through Cruft's people and through the retreating columns of Gross's brigade and strike what he believes ultimately will be Law's Alabama Brigade, a brigade he refers to as a crack brigade from the Virginia Army. Law's brigade is a pretty good brigade, but he's not really fighting Law's people. As we mentioned when we were back out here a little while ago, he's fighting elements of the 44th Alabama and perhaps a company of the 4th Alabama. The 4th Alabama is the most chopped up of all of Law's regiments, and bits and pieces of it are in 2 or 3 different places. In addition, he's running into Brown's brigade. When A.P. Stewart's attack, when this breakthrough happened at the end of the day, Clayton's brigade of A.P. Stewart's division goes due west, it crosses the Lafayette Road, it goes through Brotherton Field, and goes all the way out into Dyer Field, a considerable distance. And Bate, as I said, goes off in that direction to the north, northwest, and ends up in Poe Field. The thing to bear in mind about all of this discussion about Stewart going off in 2 directions and Law's brigade coming in, there are elements of I think, 6 Confederate brigades in the immediate vicinity of Brotherton Field that play some role in this breakthrough. But there are 2 division commanders. They're each from 2 different corps. And no senior officer is anywhere near forward enough to figure out what's going on and organize these 6 brigades into a coherent force to do something. Instead, regiments and brigades are kind of going off in all directions. And not one of these brigades, I should say, maintains an intact line of all their formations. All of them have shed bits and pieces of regiments. Part of Bates Brigade, for instance, turns to deal with Gross's brigade and gets left behind in that move to the northwest. So when Turchin comes in here and counterattacks, he's counterattacking, he's striking the 44th Alabama, Tennesseans from Brown's brigade. I think it's the 37th, no, not the 37th, they're in Bates. Bates sharpshooters. He's hitting bits and pieces of all these brigades. And from, if I could put you in Stuart's perspective, if we could teleport into Brotherton Field real quickly, Stuart would be experiencing many of the same emotions, or Stuart's men would be experiencing many of the same emotions that Palmer's and Turchin's guys out here are. Because from their perspective, if they're standing in Brotherton Field, there's fighting to their south, there's Federals coming at them from their west, there's an unknown force to their north, and now fighting from Turchin, as his men move, there's firing that erupts in their rear. And ultimately, A.P. Stewart's division will fall back. All of those pieces will trickle south, and Turchin, I think in one of my maps, in the maps of Chickamauga, I said Gross opens the door. When Gross's brigade swings back and falls apart, Turchin effectively closes that door. He counterattacks, cuts off the road, and takes a fair number of prisoners. Again, those Alabamians must have been the most prominent, because that's who he identifies as defeating and routing. That essentially is the bulk of the action.
And those Confederate brigades then all begin their withdrawal off of the field, and things at last die down here in the greater Brock Field area for a time. And this then begins to allow the repositioning, which is going to start to set up things for September the 20th, with Turchin's brigade being withdrawn off to the west, as well as Cruft and the remains of Gross, and it also sets the stage for the night attack, which is going to strike Johnson and Baird as they begin their pullback, and Claiborne's line actually overlaps the end of Johnson's line, and that's how you get the Texan, who shows up on the eastern edge of the bigger Brock Field, looking out into it, where the brush fire has set some of those trees on fire, those hollow, dead, standing trees, and you get that description of the.
Yeah, because after Turchin completes that movement, he doesn't return here and reestablish a battle position. Ultimately, he'll end up in Poe Field. He'll finally, at the end of the day, be pulled back by Joseph Reynolds, who's also trying to reconstitute his own division. The night of September 19th and 20th is pretty interesting, not just for what's happening in Winfrey Field, but if you look at a map, you know, if you go to the park and you look at the maps, the position map for September 20th has that famous question mark, and then the shank that comes down through Poe Field and the Lafayette Road, and the semicircle around Kelly Field. None of that takes shape until shortly before dawn or shortly after dawn on September 20th. Throughout the night, most of these troops will fall back to interim positions. Most of Palmer's troops, for instance, will move back north across the Brotherton Road and bivouac in the woods out there. Cheatham's men, Confederate division, will stay there overnight back where we put them, 600-800 yards that way back in the woods. And then A.P. Stewart, Bushrod Johnson, Law's division as part of, or Hood's division now commanded by Law. All of those troops will form a kind of a jumbled mass in the woods to the south of this big field. And both armies will spend the night, or most especially the early morning hours, trying to sort themselves out to get ready for combat. Anything else?
Questions? Observations?
How long was the 18th Kentucky out here with trying to pull them?
Well, it's certainly before 6 p.m. when they leave, because their departure creates the even bigger hole that will allow Deschler's brigade of Claiborne's division to kind of move through this area. So sometime between 5 and 6. Claiborne's or Turchin's attack happens out here about 5:30, and then when the 18th is recalled, or when Turchin decides to bring the 18th back too, I don't know. And not more specific than that. Then. Yes, sir.
So moving ahead 5 weeks into the future, it's Turchin and Hazen that are really the commanders for the opening of Brown's Ferry. Is that sort of a sign of the esteem with which the two of them are held as commanders?
It certainly is the case with Hazen.
And I think to a certain extent it is with Turchin too.
Yeah.
On September 20th, Turchin will repeat some of this same activity. He will. It's his brigade that will clear McDonald Field, and he'll do it directly under George Thomas's eye. Thomas will watch the whole thing. So, short answer, yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Although probably ranked in that same order of Hazen first, then Turchin, because it is Hazen who has the charge of the boat detachments.
Yeah. Hazen being a West Pointer and Turchin still being a foreigner.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? We're going to take then just a couple of minutes and convene the business session of the seminar in the woods.